Alexandre Topuria just won this past weekend at UFC 312, man. I slept all the way through those prelims by a mistake, but I managed to catch up on his fight, and I was so impressed. I was so impressed. Colby Fitness is not a very easy fighter to come in and make a UFC debut against. He's not. This was a really hard opponent for him to get past, I thought, on paper. And I thought he'd maybe have a bit of a shaky debut where people would sort of be doubting him a little bit. And of course, people will be doubting him to a certain extent, just like people do with anybody in any aspect of life. But in my opinion, this guy is top level, potentially. He looked super impressive. His boxing, like his brother Ilia, looked really good. Very rarely do you get a fighter or a brother of a fighter that looks just as good as their older brother or younger brother or whatever it is. You don't get fighters like that very often. But he's clearly a very intelligent fighter, and he did some very intelligent things on fight night. I mean, let's go over some of them right now. So like his brother, Ilia, Aleksandre fights in that sort of boxing stance where he appears to be very heavy on his lead leg. He pressurises you against the fence. He takes away your kicking space and forces you into boxing exchanges where he can exploit your body, he can exploit your head. I mean, this is just like Ilia. I mean, I don't think the power is there as much for Alexandre as it is for Ilia. You know, there's a couple of body shots that he landed where I'm like, comparatively, if Ilia started landing those accumulatively on somebody, he would probably finish them. So I don't think he has the same kind of one-punch knockout power gene Ilia has. That's an attribute I think Ilia has. He was able to drop Fitness in the fight, and it was a really good performance from him overall. Worked the body really well, worked the head really well. But just going back to his stance, I think Colby Fitness actually had a pretty decent game plan at the start of it, staying light on his lead leg. Just like guys do against Ilia, you've got to be light on your lead leg. You've got to be proactive with your kicks, or at least try to be, and try and exploit or find the space to exploit you being heavy on your lead leg, just to slow down your movement, just to take that away from you, potentially take a bit of sting out of your shots and hurt you, stop you from tracking your opponent down. I mean, it seems like a really basic and easy game plan to stick to, but then the way Ilia and the way Aleksandre managed to cut off Fitness was just absolutely fantastic. It was so similar to Ilia. He almost fights borderline the same way. I mean, I'll get an exchange up for you here where he's sort of slipping jabs, keeping his guard tight, slipping jabs the same way Ilia does on the inside and on the outside, keeping his guard really tight. Really good stuff. He is obviously a very intelligent boxer, just like Ilia is. He knows how to cut guys off intelligently. He knows how to get you to react up top, to crowd up. There was a couple of times where Fitness would crowd up and expose his body, so Alexandre would feint up top and come underneath to the body really well as well. And it looked really impressive. Exploiting those targets and exploiting that opening that Fitness gave him. Didn't rush for the finish when he had the opportunity to do it. I think I've seen some other content creators say that maybe he didn't have the same sort of killer instinct. I think for your UFC debut, I think it was a really composed performance from Alexandre. I think it was an intelligent performance. It was systematic. He showcased a good amount of grappling offensively and defensively, especially in the first round, where Fitness really, I think to get that space, I think he tried to go for a takedown once, and Alexandre dealt with it pretty easily. The reason why I think this boxing style from both the Topuria brothers will be hard to figure out for at least a good long time is they don't give you this space to reset, right? If you look at most kickboxers, it is an advantage to have a variety of kicks against someone that is mainly focused with the hands. Because if you could take those hands away and start sort of enter a flow state where you're landing counter knees, and don't get me wrong, you know, Alexandre is open to them. There's a couple of times where he'll slip and then go right down to his side, where you're thinking if Fitness can just find that knee or find a lead round kick to the head or something, he can catch him with something quite deadly there. But it's the confidence in the head movement, which, look, guys, to every style, there's upsides and there's downsides. Like, there's upsides and downsides to every style. And it's that ability to track you down and pin you against the fence and stop you from resetting. There's so many times I'll get a few exchanges for you here where Fitness throws a pretty powerful round kick to the body and it partially lands. And Topuria just doesn't move. He takes like half a step back. If it lands okay, I'm not discouraged by it. I don't need to take 5 steps backwards to overdo the movement and avoid this big head kick that he's throwing. I just need to block it calmly and get back on him. And that was a really, really intelligent thing that he did. And it stopped Fiknesi from resetting. There's another exchange, I think I can get it up here, where I think he fakes the lead teep kick. I'm not sure what he does, but he fakes something with his leg to try and get that space where Topuria moves back, and then maybe he can start chopping at the calf, or maybe he can get that separation to reset. And he goes to do it. Topuria takes half a step back, and then he's right back on him. He is so good, and Ilia is so good at seeing when someone's fainting and when they're not fainting. They're both so good at that. You know, if he's sometimes Kobe Fiknesi was faking his jab as well, and he actually flares it out from the elbow, and you could see Topuria not reacting to it. And then when he'd finally faint and then flick it out, Topuria's quick to slip it. So they're both really good defensively at making reads. And that's something I think boxers naturally are a lot better at than kickboxers. Kickboxers always often have to reset. They're always not necessarily, they can sort of get away with more, it feels like. Even though in kickboxing there's more to worry about, when they throw a big kick, there's usually a big reset from both fighters. But against a boxer who's good at dealing with kicks, can kick themselves, of course, he will have that in his arsenal, but that he's good at dealing with kicks and uses those boxing fundamentals to know not to take big steps out defensively to avoid contact, just to take that little half step out to an angle so you can create a counter punch in opportunity or whatever it is. When that's embedded into boxers and they know how to deal with kicks, I feel like oftentimes you see kickboxers struggle, because now, what have they got to do? Now they can't get you away from them with the kicks. They've got to go to either grappling, and Topuria is more than capable to deal with that, or they've got to go to the head and try a box with you, and that's where slipping the jab comes in. So now you've not just took away their space, you've not just took away their kicks, now you're forcing them to box with you, and they can't get the jab off on you. And so what happens when you can't get the jab off on someone? They take over the fight. It's that simple. It's the same rule for fighting as it is in every combat sport. If you take away someone's jab, you are in a very, 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 very good position. And more often than not, you'll see guys win those fights. So, man, overall, I've kind of glazed him here for a couple of minutes. I know some people don't like glaze. At the end of the day, I think I've got to give credit to where credit's due. I had a little bit of doubts going into this. There was so much pressure on him, being Ilia's brother. Ilia definitely mounted up the pressure on him, citing how good he is, citing how talented he is, and he delivered. He delivered. He had a lot more pressure on him in his debut than Ilia did, that's for sure. And he did not fight. Kobe Fiknesi is a good fighter. He is. He came to win, and he tried to do a lot of things. He tried to give different looks to Topuria. He tried to feint work behind his jab, tried to target the calf, tried to get him off him, tried to move defensively well, tried to even mix in a bit of grappling, but he just wasn't quite on Topuria's level from an IQ point of view. Topuria was a step ahead the whole fight. I'm really excited to see what he does next. Hopefully, as a contender, we see him stay active. Hopefully, as a contender, we see him get a few finishes. Future's looking good for him. Future's looking good for both Topuria brothers, to be honest with you. Thank you all very much for watching. Let me know what you thought. Goodbye.